What's good, everyone? This is Micro here, and today I want to give you another advanced guide in Marvel Rivals. Today we're going to talk about my main healer that I use a lot for competitive and quick play matches, and that is Cloak and Dagger. They are a very fun duo that I love the fact that they split their skill set on Dagger being the healer and Cloak being the damage dealer into, and you can swap between forms with a click of a button. It kind of makes it easier visually, especially how chaotic this game can be. Depending on which form you're at, you know exactly what type of skills is at your disposal to either heal your allies, protect your allies from, oppressive fire or even ults using Dagger, or if you swap into the Cloak form, then you know that you can do a lot of debuffs to the enemy teams, blinding them with one of his abilities, or even protect your allies from certain ults. So as long, certain criteria are met, I'll go over that in the skill sets. But overall, I definitely like how their skill set is cut down in the middle, depending on which form you are diving into. I do respect the 3-star difficulty because, mastering both of these characters' skill sets in the middle of a fight, especially when your main role is a support, it's a little bit difficult to kind of like master and get a handle on. But once you kind of learn how to do the dance, it's definitely fun, playing these characters on all game modes. But just like the other advanced guides, I'll go over, their basic skill sets, since I have not done a comprehensive guide on these two yet, but I'll also do an in-depth skill application on like how, certain skills are best used in certain situations that I have seen benefits from my matches recently. I'll also go over, the best maps and challenging maps that they might struggle with depending on the team composition or even the enemy's team formation that they might have as well. And I'll also be going over team synergies and my recommendations of a meta compositions of what you should be a part in when you are playing as Cloak and Dagger, so that you can have the best chance of victory and also understand your own play style depending on what type of composition you are put in under, during competitive ranked matches. One thing I have been learning personally in Marvel Rivals is the fact that when you are playing as a support character, your play style is severely determined based on the composition of your team as a whole. That means that if you're a single healer, then your mindset drastically shifts to be more defensive. But if you're playing with a team composition of having 2 or even 3 healers on a team, then you get to be more flexible on being a sub healer or being a main healer, or you can just be a straight up support character and just do damage when you can and then heal your other allies during heavy team fights. And also lastly, I'll give my personal thoughts and my conclusion about this character on how I've been seeing success with these characters, certain recommendations, suggestions, so you don't get yourself into trouble, when you are playing as Cloak and Dagger, because even though they are really great healers, there are definitely a few flaws that they have into their kit. But just like every character in Marvel Rivals, each character has their own flaws, and I'll definitely go over my personal thoughts about that too in this video. But without further ado, let's get started. The first section we're going to talk about is Cloak and Dagger. Cloak and Dagger's basic skill set. Like I said, since I haven't did a comprehensive guide on these two before the game launch, I'll quickly go over what each of their skill set is. On top of that, because these are basically 2 characters put into one, I'll briefly go over each one of them in tandem, just because there would be a lot of information to kind of like dive into. But just to briefly highlight what each of the character does, from their primary fire to their abilities. Here's a basic overview about each of their abilities as follows. Starting with Cloak, we're going to start with his normal attack, primary fire. It's called Dark Force Cloak. It's similar to Scarlet Witch, where you don't have to necessarily aim directly at the enemy because it's a continuous draining attack. However, what makes him different from Scarlet Witch is Scarlet Witch does a lot of her damage based off of piece percentage, whereas Cloak is just flat out 75 damage per second. which is nice. He doesn't need to be OP of a damage dealer, even though there are times where I have carried the team as being cloaked during certain team fights for one reason or another because of how much damage he can put out if left unchecked. But the thing about the Dark Foes, the person is closest to your crosshair, that's the person that's going to take, the tick damage the most. It has a 20-meter range, but it has infinite ammo, obviously, and you can't crit because it's a draining formation. So like that's where I like a lot of the similarities to Scarlet Witch. The only difference is he just does flat damage, but that's also good for his kit because one of his abilities is called Terror Cape. This is one of those abilities that he is specially unique to Cloak because not only is this special unique tailored to Cloak where he can blind the enemies that are caught within the radius of the cloak, but on top of that, anyone who gets caught within the veil, they also get a special debuff where they take more damage for about 3 seconds, and that's amplified by raw power, not percentage base, which is basically 90% of the heroes inside this game. His next ability is called Dark Teleportation. This is another ability that's unique to Cloak where he can shroud his allies into a special dark force dimension. But what this ability does is it protects everyone from any type of damage under a certain criteria. So it basically gives them an invulnerability buff. This means that any type of attack that enemy throws at you, whether it's an ult, whether it's just basic fire, melee, anything, they can't be targeted, they will be invisible, and basically won't take damage. The only thing that your teammates need to fulfill is that they can't reload, they can't shoot, or they can't run. They literally just have to stand still. That's how you can protect your teammates during a team fight, and that's what makes this move so broken but also really good. If you communicate with your teammates really well, if someone is going to chuck an Iron Man ult or a Scarlet Witch's ult, which is a one-shot kill, if timed correctly, you can throw out your Dark Teleportation, cover your whole team, and they just stay protected during that brief duration. The duration, though, of this move is only 2 seconds, so you got to time it just right because you got a 2-second window to protect all your allies. 10-meter spherical radius, so it's somewhat large, but you just can't be too far out of the circle. And also this move has a 12-second cooldown as well. Another cool thing about Dark Teleportation is it allows you to kind of float for a brief duration as well. So if you need to get to a high ground, you can quote unquote fly or float up to higher terrain using this Dark Teleportation move too, if you need to use it for that purpose. The next ability, which is similar to Dagger's ability, but this one's just called Light Embrace. This is kind of like that switch transformation move where you can swap between Cloak and Dagger during the fight. You just press this, it'll swap into Dagger form, and this is how you can swap between modes depending on what the team fight dictates, and this is how you kind of cycle through your abilities, which I'll go more in depth on the skill application. And then before I talk about Eternal Bond, which is Cloak's ultimate, it's the same thing as Dagger's, but I'll talk about Dagger's skill set first, and then I'll end it with briefly highlighting the ultimate. So now going over to Dagger's skill set. Her primary fire is called Life Force Dagger. So this one is a little bit more unique, kind of. It basically allows her to do two main things. One, this is her main ability that she can heal her allies. Even though the heal amount is relatively small, she does have 12 rounds that each rotation that she can just fire off her daggers, heal her allies, things like that. But the thing about Dagger's kit is that she has a lot of ways to boost her healing capabilities through one of her skills, or if you're partnered up with a Moon Knight, she passively gets 50% bonus heal as well. So even though her raw heal amount is relatively low, she does have a lot of ways to drastically increase her healing efficiency throughout the fight, depending on the team composition and her skill rotation. That's one main thing about Life Force Dagger. The second thing about Life Force Dagger is she can do damage. It's a small tick. She only does 15 damage per round, per dagger. But the thing about what makes Life Force Dagger so good, at least for me personally, and I have won a lot of duels against a lot of different enemies is the fact that it homes in on people. So it's one of those projectiles that it's kind of like a heat-seeking missile, but it's just dagger form. And the homing range is, as far as what I can see, is roughly around 20 to 30 meters. So it's relatively far. You can home in on someone if they're within that distance. And what makes this really great, and this is kind of like the defining kit about Dagger, or Cloak and Dagger in this case, is you can really be a support character, but you can also be an aerial denial support against airborne enemies. That would be people like Iron Man, Storm, sometimes Spider-Man. You don't have to catch them relatively around your crosshair range, and you just chuck your daggers at them. You can poke them to death. And I've done that plenty of times because a lot of people are a little too cocky when it comes to support characters in this game, and the fact that, just because you're a support, you probably won't do as much damage unless you're Mantis. I'm not going to get into that. But with Dagger though, yes, she doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but because she can home in on her daggers, and if you find a way to protect yourself for at least a good 5 seconds or so, you can actually pick off a lot of airborne enemies to either kill them off during a team fight or force them to retreat to protect your allies. So that's one less person off the board for a brief time during a team fight that you don't have to worry about. And that's one of the best things that Dagger can do. Another thing about her first ability is called Veil of Light Force. So it's a similar blanket type of ability that Cloak has, but instead of shooting a dark cloak at people, you're shooting like a light cloak, but you shoot this at your allies. Small burst heal, but this is one of those abilities that she can improve her own healing efficiency on any allies that's caught within the V. That gives them 15% healing boost. It heals them for 45, and the duration is 4 seconds. So even though the cooldown is only 12 seconds, you really only have an 8-second window where your teammates doesn't get this effect, which is not bad. Because again, if you do your skill rotation correctly with Cloak and Dagger, you won't notice a lag within that 8 seconds. This move is really great to use if you're starting a team fight, or if you're in the middle of a team fight and you see someone's low, you pop the Veil of Light Force, you can get their health back up a little bit, and then they get 15% bonus heals. So then you just chuck your daggers at them and it heals them a lot faster, and this is how you kind of help keep your teammates alive. Her next move is called Dagger Storm. This is her special ability where she chucks a spherical dagger aura within the ground or at a designated area, and any allies caught within that bubble field, they get healed significantly well throughout the duration. The heal amount is 55 per second, which is really nice, and especially if you pair it off with the Veil of Light Force, then that 55 gets even higher to like at least 65 plus. The duration of the Dagger Storm is 6 seconds, so even though the cooldown is 15 seconds, there's only a 9-second lag. But this is really great for keeping yourself and your teammates alive during a team fight or even a simple duel to protect your allies from like oncoming divers, brawlers, people like that. And again, her next ability is called Shadow's Embrace. This is her transformation move similar to Cloak, where this is the move you use to swap between Cloak and Dagger throughout the game. And then her ultimate, which is called Eternal Bond, same thing as Cloak. This is the move that you use. This ultimate is really great for healing your allies, kind of like a reactive ult to counter other people's ults. That's not a one-shot like Iron Man, Scarlet Witches. And on top of that, because each dash represents its own quote-unquote spell field, you can actually stack the dashes within a single line. This is really great for doing a little bit of damage to the enemy heroes who are getting too close to you and your teammates. It does heal extremely well, almost close to a Luna Snow's ult. It does 220 healing per second. The damage is only 30 per second, and each dash that you do lasts for 5 seconds. And another thing about Cloak and Dagger is it's slightly less compared to most of the other support characters' ults. The support characters' energy cost is the most out of the 3 roles, but the average is about 4,000. But for Cloak and Dagger, you only need to get to 3,400 to be able to pop his ult. So it's a little bit easier to kind of like rotate your ult a lot more often. So that's something that's good to know. And then her team up ability is with Moon Knight, and they just get a passive ability where Dagger, whenever you're paired up with the Moon Knight, she just gets a 15% healing boost. So like that's how Dagger really becomes a great healer. If she's paired up with Moon Knight, she gets a 15% healing boost. Then on top of that, if you pop off the Veil of the Light Force, well, that's a 50% more healing on top of that. So your Light Force Dagger, your Dagger Storm, and even your Eternal Bond will do significantly more healing than most of the. Now, if we're going to talk about advanced skill applications of these characters, there's a lot of possibilities you can use their abilities depending on what the situation demands. And I'm going to start by talking about Dagger here, because primarily your main role is being a support character. So Dagger is going to get most of the conversation here. Cloak, yes, you can do a lot of damage capabilities with Cloak, but since you are a support character, those opportunities don't come by as often, and that's something you just have to trust your DPS heroes to do a lot of the damage on your behalf. But for Dagger though, one of the advanced skill applications you can do is whenever you are playing support, it doesn't matter if you're solo healing or you're partner up with another healer, so it's like a two healer conformation. Even though we're going to talk about Dagger Storm here, that with Dagger Storm you can chuck Dagger Storm at a designated area, and anybody within that area gets a lot of healing out of it. One of the best ways you can do for yourself to make sure you stay alive is you just save the Dagger Storm for your own, because during this season and probably future seasons, brawlers and dive heroes are very popular right now. That means for the likes of Iron Fist, Spider-Man, or even Venom. Those guys would have a lot of opportunities to just swing over your team's formation and dive at you and your other healers during the game. Therefore, if you save the Dagger Storm for yourself, you can easily just pop the Dagger Storm to the ground, like underneath you, so you're within the bubble, and during that duel, whenever you're getting dove, it's going to make it harder for the dive heroes to burst you down, because you're already going to get 55 healing per second. And on top of that, if you switch the Cloak, well, now you have another ability, the Dark Teleportation, to protect yourself even further during that duel. And this is how I'm able to stay alive for a lot of the team fights, is because even though I can use the Dagger Storm on my teammates and just keep them alive and keep them at whatever position they're at, I get dove a lot, and that makes sense because I'm a support character. It's when I respect the competency of the enemy heroes, and I just use the Veil of the Light Force from my allies to give themselves a 15% healing boost. I use Light Force Dagger to just heal them up, but then I use the Dagger Storm on me if I'm getting dove. And then if someone is diving at me, I just chuck Dagger Storm on the ground. Then I switch to Cloak, and then I use, a Terror Cape to try to like blind them, or I just use Dark Teleportation if, as soon as I'm somewhat back to full health, and if there are like more than one diver coming at me, because I know I can't take on two brawler heroes at once. And even if I could, I would most likely have to use my ult at that time to either force them to retreat, or if they're trying to really take me out, well, then that would level the playing field for at least a short duration for me to try to do as much damage as I can. So the Cloak and Dagger during duels, that's one of the best ways you can, stay alive the most. Another thing about Light Force Dagger, because like I said, it is a homing projectile. If you see that your teammates are having a hard time dealing with Iron Man or even Storm, who are just permanently airborne and they're naturally high in the air, you can use your Light Force Dagger to kind of pick them off out of the sky. Now, if they are standing in one place for too long, you can actually pick off the kill if you have the opportunity to. But as long as you can just poke them enough to force them to retreat a little bit, then that's one less hero who is a DPS hero that's adding pressure to your team. And you're able to do that very well because you can home in on them. So even when they're starting to fly away, the dagger still travels to their direction. So like that's that unknown pressure that you can bring to the table that a lot of people overlook when it comes to Cloak and Dagger. For Cloak, as I mentioned earlier, one of the best ways you use dark teleportation is to prevent and shut down enemy ults. Simply because you have a 2-second window to basically grant your whole team and you invincibility and invulnerability. So as long as they don't move, reload, or shoot or run. So this plays very well if you're in a full team composition and you're communicating with one another very well. If you hear an enemy about to go off, or if someone tells you that someone's popping a null, you can easily just use dark teleportation, shroud your allies as best as possible, because you can freely move and you will be fine, but your allies just can't move during that time. So you can, during that short duration, you can just position yourself as best as possible to cover as much allies during that time in order to protect your allies from any else. This also includes Jeff, which Jeff is notorious from, when it comes to domination maps, capture flag, things like that, and Jeff could just swallow your whole team at the last second and just spit you off into no man's land and just die. You can pop your dark teleportation during that swallow animation and you can protect yourself and your allies from getting swallowed up. So then that completely shuts down Jeff's ult right from the get-go too. So the thing about cloaks is you gotta time your dark teleportation wisely, and you just gotta have good communication with you and your teammates. Now if you're playing solo queue, good luck. That's all I gotta say. I'm sorry. It's hard, especially when it comes to like low elo. There's not many people that's hopping on game chats a lot, so if you're playing Cloak and Dagger from like, let's say bronze to maybe at least diamond, and you're playing solo queue, it's very hard to communicate with your teammates. So my best recommendation is stay close to your teammates, and if you're in the middle of a team fight and you know someone's gonna probably pop an ult off, or they are releasing an ult that could one-shot your whole team, just cover yourself. And if any allies is nearby you, yeah, you can try to move close to them, but you can't guarantee that they're gonna understand the assignment and stop shooting and moving during that short duration. People are still learning other characters' movesets, so that's not going to work 100% of the time, but you can stay alive 100% of the time during those matches. So that is my best explanation for you. Now when it comes to Eternal Bond, it doesn't matter which form you're at when you use it, it's the same type of ultimate. But the thing about Eternal Bond, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Vern's ult from Overwatch, where Torbjorn, he just chucks a bunch of lava around the ground, and people who stands on the lava, they take a lot of damage. But with Eternal Bond though, it's a lot less of a damage per tick, but you get a lot of heals out of it. So obviously, as a support character, it makes sense. Each dash you do, you give your allies a whole lot of healing in it. But an advanced skill application you can use for Eternal Bond is you can actually stack each dash in the same linear formation. So that means that if you're in the middle of a team fight and they have like the Punisher, Winter Soldier, a whole lot of people that doesn't one-shot you, but that can easily just burst you down really fast, you can pop your Eternal Bond in a linear formation. And again, this comes with good communication with you. Your teammates could stand underneath that line, and with 3 stacks of the Eternal Bond in one line, your team and you literally becomes invincible, period. Even if the enemy Loki copies the Punisher, and both Loki and the Punisher use their ult, you guys will stay alive, no matter what. Just put that in perspective of how godly you will become throughout that short duration. If 2 Punisher ults can't burst you down if you stack your Eternal Bonds on top of each other, that means throughout that short duration, you and your teammates could just wipe the floor or do as much pressure as you can, scot-free, worry-free, doesn't matter. You will be protected throughout that short duration. Even on top of that, if you want to add more security during that team fight, wait a few seconds, until you can anticipate like 1 or 2 of your Eternal Bonds might wear off, and then pop the Veil of the Light Force onto your allies, because they should all be grouped together, so you should hit them all fairly quickly, which then they'll give them a 15% healing boost, which then complements the Eternal Bond dashes. Then you pop your Dagger Storm, so they're all within that bubble now, and the healing from the Dagger Storm the healing boost from the Veil of the Life Force, and whatever stack is left from the Eternal Bond, that is what you can do to prolong your healing capabilities during the team fight. Now that's kind of like a combo in itself, but I mean, that's just how broken Dagger can be if you stack her abilities correctly. You can make your whole team become invincible during that time frame. And let's say even if you do 3 stacks of Eternal Bond on top of each other, and let's say an Iron Man starts to pop itself, you can just switch to Cloak, pop your Dark Teleportation, and just cancel that out altogether. So you don't even have to worry about single target ults, because Cloak can do that teleportation move and protect your allies for 2 seconds, and they're still within that, you know, all that healing effects. So you can really set up Dagger to protect your team from all sources of damage. And that's like the biggest advanced skill set that I forgot to mention too, that another thing you can do with Eternal Bond is, if you don't want to stack the dashes on top of one another, you could create a big triangular force field that does, you know, tick damage and healing as well. So if you want to cover a large area, like for instance, if you want to circle around a payload, or you want to create a large bubble area around a checkpoint, you can do that as well, so that you can ensure that you're covering all your teammates within a circular area, and you can still protect your allies, you know, using, you know, the Life Force Veil and the Dagger Storm. And if someone wants to pop an Iron Man ult at your team, you can still switch to Cloak and use Dark Teleportation and protect them as well. Now the next, and that's like the biggest advanced skill set that I can just give you, that I've seen success for right now while playing as Cloak and Dagger in Marvel Rivals. Now the next session I want to talk about for Cloak and Dagger. Now for them two being a support character, I don't really see a whole lot of maps that I would find challenging to play Cloak and Dagger in, just because their role is very universal. Therefore, healers works well in almost any map, but some maps work better for some support characters compared to others. And I'll try my best to explain that in this section for Cloak and Dagger. Because of their moveset and their skill set and everything, yes, Cloak can, you know, briefly fly around for like a couple seconds to kind of get on high ground and things like that. Their best map usage for Cloak and Dagger would be any type of capture a flag, domination type of maps, where you and your team needs to capture a checkpoint, because one of two things will happen. When you capture the checkpoint, your teammates will more than likely stay around a certain area to guard against the checkpoint, or if you're pushing the enemy back to their respawn point, a lot of them will be within a certain area to make it easier for you to chuck your Life Force daggers to keep your allies alive. And also it'll be easier for you to see who's low on health, and you can use your Life Force Veil to kind of give them a healing boost as well, things like that. And also, like during major team fights, it's easier for you to use your ultimates to create a large bubble formation, or you can stack the dashes on top of each other to kind of really kind of group your allies together and make them invincible for a short duration. Another type of map that Cloak and Dagger would probably be best used is any type of open-ended maps. Now the reason why I say this is because, as I mentioned earlier, Dagger is a really good aerial denial support hero. Sometimes you can 1v1 an Iron Man or a Storm on your own. It takes a little bit of prep work, but if you can time it right, you can actually 1v1 those two heroes by yourself, and you can pick them off as a kill before you die. But it's just the fact that her daggers are homing base. You definitely want to make sure your allies is within LOS constantly, and that's what open map areas can do, like the Clintar map. Especially in the beginning of the Clintar map, those two circular areas are fairly large and they're fairly open, so it's easy for you to kind of like throw your daggers at your allies to keep them alive, or it's easier for you to see, you know, a flying enemy like an Iron Man or a Storm, or even a Doctor Strange if he uses levitation a lot, to kind of like pick them off from the sky. And because those maps are favorable to the airborne enemies, you can easily just see where they're at. You can mark them for your DPS heroes to pick them off if you have a sniper like Hawkeye, or you can just pick them off yourself and force them to retreat, get low to the ground, or pick them off as a kill if they're low on health. However, certain maps that might be challenging for Cloak and Dagger would probably be any type of close quarter maps. And the only reason why I would say this is because when it comes to certain close quarter maps or maps that has a lot of hallways, it's hard for you to keep your allies alive if they're always diving farther into the enemy lines and you don't have your LOS in sight of them because either an object is blocking in the way or they kind of turn around into the corner, so your daggers can't hit them directly. Yes, even though your daggers can bounce off of terrain and it doesn't break terrain, if it's bouncing off a wall, it doesn't home. So if you want your daggers to home in on your allies to heal them, you have to aim at them directly. If not, then you're basically trying to bounce your shots and hoping that it might heal your allies if they bounce too far around a corner trying to fight other enemies at the same time. So I don't see a whole lot of great application to Cloak and Dagger in close quarter maps because of that. On top of that, when it comes to close quarter maps, if you are actually getting dove by an enemy Spider-Man or a Venom or any type of brawler hero, including Iron Fist, it's very hard for you to kind of get away because there's not much options for you to travel between one room to another because you're in between hallways, or the map is so congested and close by that you can't just run away, because they also don't have any mobility moves. That's the one caveat to Cloak and Dagger that poses as a flaw to them, is they don't have any type of mobility moves. I don't consider Dark Teleportation as a mobility move, it's just because it's a brief duration. And on top of that, Cloak and Dagger doesn't have any CC moves either. I think closed off maps or congested maps are a big con to Cloak and Dagger because you are very susceptible to dives and it's hard to keep your allies alive if they keep run around corridors and things like that. But the next part of map usage for Cloak and Dagger is the basic map layout of how you should position yourself when you're playing as Cloak and Dagger. Now, regardless of what map you're playing in, when you're playing as Cloak and Dagger, your objective is to try to position yourself in the back of your own team formation because you're a support character. The only time that you can probably be okay, walking up to the front and just being with your tanks is mainly when you're about to ult during a checkpoint, a chokehold, or just in the area of you guys being in a very intense team fight. You can briefly walk up to the front of the line, you can cast your ult around your tanks, so then it keeps your tanks alive, so as long as they're not flying, so that your tanks can soak up more damage. It keeps you alive because you're within that bubble during that ult duration. It allows your DPS heroes to be more aggressive because then they can move out of the middle of the area of your guys' team of formation. They can move up to the front and add a lot of pressure to the enemy teams as well. So when you're ulting, yes, you can definitely walk up to the front, cast your ult, stay around for a few seconds, and then if you want, you can cast your Dagger Storm because everyone's already congested into a circular area, and you can just add more pressure that way. But if you don't have an ult, a lot of the times you just remain in the back because then it's easier for you to see who's low on health. You can cast your Life Force Veil on your allies to keep them alive. Stay close to your ally supports so that you can easily ping the enemy diver and you can get assistance relatively quickly. Even though you have Cloak, and Cloak could do a lot of damage, you're still a support character, so there's not much you can do to really fight off more than one diver. So that's why I say stay close to your allies, and that's why I'm talking a lot of usage for Dagger instead of Cloak, because again, your main role is to support. But yes, if you are getting dove by one Iron Fist, you can 1v1 an Iron Fist if you really want to try. But if you're getting dove by multiple heroes, then no, it's best to retreat back to one of your other teammates so that you can level the playing field a little bit. And that's why you should stay in the back, because you can easily assess and see who's coming after you, so you have at least a second or two to decide what you want to do before they actually land. and you start the battle. And that's pretty much the gist of the map layout and the challenging maps for Cloak and Dagger. The next topic on the list I want to talk about is combos and rotations for Cloak and Dagger. Now, when it comes to this particular duo, there's not a lot of damaging combos you can do, but there's a lot of rotations you can decide of how you want to utilize when you're playing as Cloak and Dagger, depending on your team composition and also depending on the team fight itself. But one of the things I've learned during my competitive rank matches as Cloak and Dagger is I always find my combos and my rotations, I always start with Dagger using Dagger Storm. This is kind of like on a do list if you're trying to start a team fight, or if you're in the middle of a team fight and you're starting to get low. I always find myself using Dagger Storm first. This solidifies the foundation of, hey, I'm gonna stay here and I'm going to protect my allies, so I'm not, while I'm getting healed at the same time. Or if I'm trying to 1v1 an Iron Man to relieve some pressure from my allies, I'm gonna use a Dagger Storm so that let's see who kills who first. I always find that using Dagger Storm as the start of your combo or your rotation ensures that you can do whatever you want to do as best as you can without dying so quickly, because you have like that few seconds of like constantly getting healed while you're doing your combos and rotation. So in short, you start your combo off by using Dagger Storm, and if you're playing defensively or you're trying to fight off an aerial hero, you then just pair it off with Life Force Dagger to try to poke that enemy hero away to force them to retreat. That's one combo for Dagger. Now if you're playing Cloak and you want to be a little bit more aggressive, depending on the situation, you can then use Dagger Storm, then switch to Cloak, and then within that bubble area, you then cast your Terror Cape at the enemy, and then use your Dark Force Cloak, your primary fire, to force them to retreat or kill them off. And during that first 3 seconds of you dueling that person, they're taking 20% more damage. So instead of you doing 75, you're easily doing 90 per second, which that's nothing to scoff about from a support hero. And that's why I say that when it comes to the general usage for Cloak and Dagger, it's really just you staying as Dagger form. But as soon as you're starting to duel against someone, or you're playing as a sub healer because you already have like one extra healer, or you have 2 healers in your team and you're kind of like the third flex spot, then you can be Cloak a lot more often. And that's kind of like one of my main combos that I use. If you're in the middle of a team fight and your allies are suffering a lot more damage, whether because the enemy heroes are doing their ults or they're just using a lot of cooldown abilities to really kind of like knock your allies off the map, you can do this defensive combo by using Veil of the Life Force first. If you're not in the middle of that team formation and you're not getting hit a lot, you can start the combo by using Veil of the Life Force formation, and then use your Life Force Dagger to just start homing in on your allies to heal them up as much as you can. Or if you are next to your allies and you're all getting shot down, then you can use this other defensive combo by using Dagger Storm first onto the ground, then use Veil of the Light Force towards like your ally DPS heroes who's outside of the bubble, or any brawler heroes that is about to dive into the enemy team. You can quickly cast it on them so that they can get a little bit of a healing boost, and then you can use your Life Force Dagger to try to home in on them while you're still within that bubble, so that they get the healing boost, they can stay alive, you're staying alive from the Dagger Storm, and you can protect your allies that way during a team fight. Or you can do an ult combo, and this is what I always do, is I try to start this combo off with Dagger. I cast my Eternal Bond, and it doesn't matter if I'm doing 3 stacks in a row or if I'm doing, big old bubble radius around a choke point or checkpoint. After my last dash, I then cast Veil of the Light Force on any allies, especially the tanks, because they're going to probably soak up a lot of the damage during this time. Or if I'm trying to protect a checkpoint on my own, which there has been a lot of times, a 1v3 different people, I would use my Eternal Bond, then I use Shadow's Embrace to switch to Cloak, and then I use Terror Cape to blind as many heroes as I can, and then I use Dark Force Cloak to just do as much damage as I can throughout the duration and try to pick off as much heroes as I can too. And then if I'm losing that fight and I'm getting severe trouble, or if my allies manage to kind of come back to the checkpoint with me to kind of finish the fight on my stead, then I finish it off with a dark teleportation to just retreat from the fight and go find a med pack and just breathe a little bit. Like, that's a longer skill rotation, but it works a lot of the time depending on who you're fighting and depending on how you stack your Eternal Bond dashes to. The next part I want to talk about is team synergies and my recommendations of meta compositions for when you are playing as Cloak and Dagger. Now, because Cloak and Dagger is such a unique type of support hero, they are very flexible on what type of team composition you're playing with, but also they have a lot of different team synergies outside of Moon Knight that you can easily pair up with to really be on the defensive, to be this tanky team with you keeping your allies alive, or you can play as an aggressive team synergy and just really maul down the enemy heroes with ease because of your Dark Force Veil of amplifying damage taken. So that means that if you're playing as an aggressive comp, a lot of team synergies you can do is they synergize well with brawler heroes such as Black Panther, Iron Fist, Spider-Man, any type of dive heroes, simply because they can easily dive to the enemy backline, and if the team fight isn't like spread out, then you can easily play as Dagger and you can use your homing daggers to heal the diver heroes so that they can stay alive. And if the team fight isn't spread out, you can also use Cloak to not use the Dark Force Veil at the enemies in front of you. You can try and use it at the enemy supports or the enemy backline so that your brawler heroes can amplify their damage for a few seconds while they're doing their skill rotation and really just delete the support heroes with ease because you help them out. So that's one type of team synergy. Another type of team synergy you can do is Cloak and Dagger really kind of pairs well with Punisher. And the reason why I say this is because Punisher is one of those DPS heroes. He just does a lot of damage in a lot of different ways. And he's one of those simple DPS heroes where he can bring a lot of pressure to the table because of what his skill set is. And he has 300 HP, so he's not as squishy compared to every other DPS hero in the game. So as a Cloak and Dagger person, you can protect Punisher, especially when he sets up his turret. You can just hang around the turret formation to act as a falsetto shield for you, because if you're hanging behind his turret, the turret will take damage, but you and Punisher won't take any damage from that. And on top of that, if there's heroes who's trying to flank the Punisher while he's in turret form, then you can easily switch to Cloak and you can pop your Dark Force Veil and amplify the damage taken of any divers during that time, so that both you and Punisher can easily burst them down with ease. And that's another synergy. A third synergy is if you need to be very defensive, either during Punisher being in turret form or even when Punisher uses his ult, you can use your Life Force Veil to amplify healing taken, or you can pop your Dagger Storm, because especially when Punisher he is in his ult form, he's actually slow. In my mind, he walks a little bit slower compared to everyone else. So he gets to stay in the Dagger Storm a lot longer compared to other heroes if he's constantly like walking around. So you can easily keep him alive that way. And that's why with Punisher, there are multiple ways that you can protect him, and because he dishes out so much damage, you don't need to worry about adding pressure because he'll do that on your behalf. But if you can keep him alive, well then he can just keep doing what he's doing and just dish out any damage to any heroes in front of him with his skill set. Another team synergy that Cloak and Dagger pairs well with is Luna Snow or a Mantis. And the reason why I say that is because one of the biggest flaws to Cloak and Dagger is the fact that they don't have any form of CC. And that's where Mantis and Luna Snow can come into the picture. So if you are playing in a team formation with at least 2 healers, well, the Luna Snow and the Mantis will have that CC move. So in the event that you are getting dove by an enemy Brawler, Iron Fist, Venom, Spider-Man, etc. Well, they can use their CC move at them, and then you could just focus on either A, using your Dark Force Veil to really burst down that one diver and just make him regret it, or if you're getting dove by multiple heroes, then you can use your Dagger Storm around you and your healer, just like clump together, and then they can still use their CC move on one of the diver heroes. You use your Dagger Storm to keep your both alive, use your Life Force Veil to make sure they stay alive a lot longer, and then you can do one of two things. Use your Life Force Dagger if they're getting dove a lot and their health is starting to drain fast, or if they're dabbing after you, you can then switch to Cloak form, use your Dark Force Veil, and then try to duel against that other diver hero as best as possible. And if things just gets really too hectic, you can try and use your Dark Teleportation to give you and your healer a brief moment of respite to kind of retreat away, reposition yourself, or retreat back up to the front lines a little bit so that your DPS heroes can help you out. But what Cloak and Dagger lacks in form of like a CC ability, that's what Mantis and Luna Snow can bring to the table, because Luna could freeze the enemies and Mantis could put the enemies to sleep. So then that helps supplement what you lack as Cloak and Dagger. But what you can still bring to the table is you can bring the unique ability of amplifying damage taken to the enemy heroes, so that you and your supporters can actually do a lot of good damage if you're getting dove, or you can protect them from by using your Dark Teleportation, and even your healing capabilities is really great for what you can bring to the table. So those are like the main type of team synergies that I've found really good uses for Cloak and Dagger. Now, in terms of like meta comps and my recommendations for meta comps, with Cloak and Dagger, it's actually really flexible. You don't need to worry about like doing like the 2-2-2 formation. You can, and it actually works. You know, you being that one healer, and then you have another healer on the team. That would be like the most, and this one is a little bit more stressful, but it can work. And I have won matches doing this composition. Is you can easily do an aggressive meta comp of you being the only healer in your team. So that can easily look like a 2-3-1 split. So having 3 DPS heroes, 2 tanks, and you being the only healer. Or if you guys are being aggressively a passive aggressive team, of having a 3-2-1 split of having 3 different tanks, 2 DPS heroes, and you being the only healer. That can work. However, it is severely stressful to the healer because you are the only healer, and because none of your heroes could passively heal in this game, that means a lot of the pressure of you keeping your team alive is exponentially more. But that also means that your team is also very aggressive at the same time. So if you just really need a lot more firepower, you can pull it off, but then that means that you just need to play extremely defensive and stay in dagger form for 90% of the match, because that's all you're able to do. It's just, you just need to focus on healing your teammates, and it can work. You know, if you can rotate your heals relatively well, and if your allies aren't overextending and dying too much, it can pull it off. It's just means that, yeah, a lot of the healing pressure falls on you, especially if they don't know where all the med packs are at and they only resort to you to heal. So that's more of a high risk, high reward type of composition. And those are the 3 main, you know, team compositions that I could recommend if you're playing ranked matches. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about is just my personal thoughts and my conclusion about Cloak and Dagger for Marvel Rivals. I was actually surprised how much I fell in love with these two. When I started playing the game, I really just wanted to main as Magneto and Squirrel Girl. However, when I started playing ranked matches, I quickly learned that even though there's no role queue, it means that it breeds a lot of possibilities for a chaotic composition. But that also means that a lot of people in this game doesn't really want to play healers. So then I had to resort to myself playing as the healer, because I would often find myself being the only healer in the team composition when it comes to ranked matches. And even though I didn't like it at the time, I tried Mantis. I hated Mantis. I'm probably gonna be like one of those few people that I just don't care for Mantis a whole lot. I like Luna Snow, but when I tried Cloak and Dagger, I just fell in love with their kit instantaneously. I like how you can just switch between you know, a healing skill set to a damaging skill set that also works as a debuffer, like a saboteur, you know, to kind of amplify damage taken, and it's unique to them. They can blind enemies too as Cloak, and there's a lot of, you know, different ways you can stack your Eternal Bond ult to create like one line of invincibility for you and your teammates, or you can create a big old blob field of just constant healing but just more slight ticking to cover a larger radius around a payload or something like that. Like, there's a lot of different options that you can bring to the table as Cloak and Dagger. It just takes a little bit of creativity, and that's one of the things I like about Cloak and Dagger. And on top of that, as Dagger, she just becomes an aerial denial support character against Iron Man and Storm, and even Spider-Man, because Spider-Man swings around a lot and he is fast. It is hard to catch a Spider-Man in midair while he's swinging, but as Dagger, it's a lot easier because her daggers home in. So even if he's in like mid-swing formation, he's just swinging really fast. As long as you chuck your dagger while your crosshair is within his vicinity, the dagger is gonna travel no matter what, and he's gonna hit him. And that's makes it easier to kind of like poke people out of the sky a lot easier that as a support character, because there's not a lot of support characters that can do that. And I think that's one big unique trait that she can bring to the table that no other support hero can do. Whereas every other support hero, you just gotta aim your shots, which for Spider-Man, that's hard to do. She can do it better. For someone like, if you're fighting against an Iron Man or a Storm, well, they're severely far away. And that's kind of hard for, you know, some the other support heroes to kind of take aim at if they're so far away. But Cloak and Dagger could easily just home her daggers and just poke them out of the sky. Lunar Snow would be a close second because I could snipe an Iron Man and a Storm from a far away range, and I don't see much of a damage fall off. So Lunar Snow would probably be a close second, and she can also probably CC them. But Lunar Snow's CC move, it's a projectile base and it's not as fast, so anyone could see that snowball travel from afar away. But with Dagger, her daggers fly relatively fast, but it homes in, so it just makes life so much easier to help your teammates take care of those airborne heroes. So then your allies, they really just need to focus on, you know, the enemies on the ground. And especially if you have a Hawkeye on your team, well, then you're really helping your Hawkeye by picking off those Iron Man and the Storms, so that he doesn't need to worry about, you know, sniping them out of the sky. He can snipe at the people at the ground. So again, there's a lot of creativity that Cloak and Dagger could bring to the table, and that's what I like. And because of that, you know, during the intense, you know, team fights, if I'm the only healer or if I'm playing with another healer, like, that's how I'm able to kind of get a lot of the MVP, you know, play of the games as Cloak and Dagger, is just because I understand my role as a support character, and I basically make sure that my teammates stay alive first, and then if I want to do some damage, I can do that. But because I understand skill rotation of using Dagger Storm on me first, it's probably how I can stay alive in the fight a lot longer compared to some other supports. The only caveat is I just don't have a CC move, and that's fine. I mean, I know a lot of YouTubers say that, you know, most other supports, you know, bringing CC to the table is just broken, but you don't really need a CC move to win a fight. Not all the time. You just need to be careful on how you protect yourself, because as a support hero, the longer you can protect yourself, then the better you're off at protecting your allies. And that's a concept that I learned playing Overwatch as a Lucio. And as Lucio main, you know, back in Overwatch 1 days, I didn't have a CC move. I mean, I could boot people away, but that's not CC. So I've already learned to just understand that I don't need a CC ability to kind of like be really good as a healer. And a support hero doesn't need a CC move to be broken. It's just how good you are at keeping your teammates alive. Whether they suck or they're a pro, if you can keep your teammates alive, then it just makes it easier for you to stay alive, because then, you know, there's a lot less heroes diving at you because you're protecting the front lines with all your heals. And if you are getting dove, well, you can switch to Cloak and just scare them away as best as possible. And that's something that Cloak can do a lot better, in my opinion. So overall, for the Cloak and Dagger mains out there, regardless of how other people might say that Cloak and Dagger might not be the best healer, keep working on your skill rotations and prove them wrong, because I see a lot of great potential for Cloak and Dagger in the future seasons of Marvel Rivals, and I can understand how Marvel Rivals gave their difficulty star a 3-star. And mechanically, I would say that, yeah, the intellectual gameplay mechanic, I would say their difficulty is still a 3-star. You know, it's fairly simple to understand, you know, how each character works. There's a lot of creativity you can bring to the table, but it's not, let's say, as difficult to master in compared to, like, you know, mastering a Spider-Man or playing as Squirrel Girl, things like that. That takes a lot more skill to master their skill set. But for Cloak and Dagger, I'd say a 3-star is good across all the boards, and that's my personal conclusion on Cloak and Dagger. Well, that wraps up for today's video. If you liked today's video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and also leave a comment down below. I have been taking a lot of time to reply back to all your comments below. I do appreciate all the love and the feedback that I've gotten from the Magneto Advanced Guide and the Squirrel Girl Advanced Guide, so I do hope you guys enjoy Cloak and Dagger's Advanced Guide as well. Like I said, and if you haven't noticed from watching all my other ranked match gameplays, those have been the main 3 heroes I've been using the most. Therefore, that's why I feel very confident on making these advanced guides on these heroes, because I've learned a lot playing quick plays, custom, and even ranked matches with these heroes as well. And with Cloak and Dagger, I've had a lot of fun with them, and I'm super excited to see what future seasons would bring to the table of how we can best play, you know, Cloak and Dagger against other heroes that might come out as well. So if you want to hear any updated guides on how you can, you know, stay up to date on how to master Cloak and Dagger, like I said, definitely leave a subscribe and a like on this video so you can stay tuned for more videos. Have enjoyed your new year and your holidays. This is Microtastrophe, and I'll catch you guys later.